doing?
Dude, I'm doing great. I'm like super excited because I feel like from a gambling perspective, the way you beat Vegas is you
Mhm.
beat them before the game start, get some future bets. And baseball's the best one because if you're right about the team, like the Orioles last year, what was their projected win total? 76 or something?
Yeah, yeah, and they hit that about month and a half to spare. So those are
So,
always the best ones.
so the goal here as we do our MLB preview is two things, right?
Mhm.
Besides just having a nice baseball conversation, I want to find who are the couple teams that are going to be significantly better and significantly worse than projected. Because I'm almost positive every single year there's a team where it's like a 20 game gap,
Yep,
right? So
every
we
single
want to
year.
find it. We're going to get right into it. But before we do baseball, I was just curious. I didn't even ask you. I probably should have asked you before we started. But did you see the Johnny Manziel interview with Shannon Sharp?
Yes, that
Good.
was incredible.
Well, what was your main takeaway? And then I'll tell you what
Well,
I
so
think.
I've only seen clips of it. I've probably seen a total of like 10 minutes in clips. I like how open Johnny was. I just think that that's one of the coolest aspects that he's gotten, especially after the Netflix uh thing came out, is he is just so open about his struggles. And he's like the one time where Shannon was like, you lost 40 pounds. And he's like, yeah, because I'm on a strict diet of blow. And he was like just open about it. He's like, of course, that's what drugs do. Like, he's like, I'm not going to hide that. And then him talking about Reggie Bush, I loved him saying that Reggie Bush deserves to be up there for the Heisman every year.
It was a fantastic interview. I watched every minute of it. It was over 2 hours. But I did the same thing with the Cat Williams interview. I did the same thing with Monique going there. What I believe is Shannon Sharp is not the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
But what he does that I'm trying to do a better job of is how do you know when to shut up? Like when you talk for a living, when you want to get your opinions out, the hardest thing, you're on a show with 4 or 5 other people sometimes. And it's like, as much as you want to talk, how do you really know when to shut up? Same thing in sales.
Yeah.
How do you know when to shut up? Same thing when you're arguing with your girlfriend. Like, how do you just when to shut up? And his ability to just let his guests carry on. Um, if you like the guest or if you're interested in the topic, it seems to be the best interview right now that we have because it's just unfiltered and 2 hours. So if you like the person or you like the content and Johnny Manziel's story, there's certain people where you can't compare their story, right? Like you're just like, who would I compare Johnny Manziel to? I can't think of a comp.
Yeah. And I think what's craziest about, like what you just said, with how good Shannon Sharp is at letting knowing when to shut up and letting the other person talk, because that's the opposite of him on TV. It's like the whole time he's on TV, you just see Shannon Sharp yelling at people and doing this. So it's weird to then see him kind of take that step back and be like, no, this is for you to tell your story. Like, I'm just here to ask questions and figure it out. So I really like his show.
Yeah, I encourage you to listen to the whole thing, especially if you're a Johnny Man. Like that was that time period. I can remember certain moments of his life, like where I was. Like that was so transformative what he was doing,
Yeah.
and I think most people, frankly, would have fell into it. It almost makes you appreciate the athletes, whether it's LeBron's the first one. Now we have Lamar, where it's like they never get into any trouble. Like what you just end up doing with Johnny Manziel do is just like party with your friends and have a good time. It's
Exactly. And
almost
it's like, I love when Shannon was talking to him about selling merchandise. He's just like, yeah, he's like, I did it. He's like, I saw the money and stuff. And it's like, it's what I feel like I would do if I came into that situation. It's always like
100%.
relatable. It's like, yeah, I would probably have someone offer me a few $1,000s for me to sign a few things. I'd be like, yeah, I'm a broke college kid. Of course I'll do that. And it's just like, for him, it's like, yeah, that happened. And like, didn't get away with it.
We could talk. I could talk about that
Yeah.
for a long time. That was a really fascinating interview. But let's do it. Let's get right into it. I don't know where we're going to go and how we're going to do it, but I'm going to become an expert on the Colorado Rockies, the Padres, the Diamondbacks. I feel like I got a decent handle on the Dodgers. The Padres, they completely changed their team. So we'll start from the bottom. And the floor is I'm just going to kind of poke if you say something or figure out what I need to know. And I want people really, I hope everybody enjoys it. But again, from a gambling perspective, if you think you hear something where it's like, man, that's interesting, go do some research on that team, like the Zach Bollinger of the Orioles, like whoever that is for the Rockies, go find that guy. So let's start with them. They went 59 and 103 last year. My first thought with the Colorado Rockies is that that run they had in 2008 or whatever, I think it was 2008, that environment, the home field advantage, they were actually 37 and 44 at home. Can you please give me any optimism here? Their win total is projected at 59 and a half.
Yeah.
Start off, give me your elevator pitch on the Rockies. Is there any optimism?
They have a good on paper, this is what's so frustrating about the Rockies is on paper they have a good lineup. And they really do. You have the Charlie Blackmon, Chris Bryant, Nolan Jones, Ryan McMahon. They have a lot of power, which, of course, in Colorado, that's what you want. The downside is they play in Colorado and they can't get pitchers unless they draft and develop. You're not getting pitchers to go there. So after Kyle Freeland, like it takes a drop. It is not, their rotation is definitely where you're going to find.
So before you become a wet blanket on the Rockies, let's stick with the positives first. So we'll go through the lineup. I took the liberty. I mean, I guess we don't know for sure exactly what the lineup's going to be. We're still a month away, but I found a handful of sites I think do a really good job. So just talk to me through this. You said Blackmon leads off. I mean, that's one of the 10 best leadoff hitters that we have in baseball, right? Is he still really elite?
I mean, this obviously is not going to be the Charlie Blackmon of, 4 years ago, but to play in Colorado, he is a good, like you said, he's a solid leadoff hitter. And really, I would say 1 through 6 of the projected lineup I'm looking at right now for the Rockies is solid. And that's what's kind of annoying about the Rockies because you look at it and it all comes down to health. You see Charlie Blackmon has struggled with health throughout his career. Chris Bryant has not been healthy pretty much at all since he signed that massive deal in Colorado. And I know because I keep taking him in fantasy baseball thinking this is the year that he stays healthy and goes off in Colorado. So I really want Chris Bryant to stay healthy because him playing in the Rockies, in Colorado, he can put up some monster numbers.
So I'm going to read through the projected lineup, and then I want you to tell me which one of these guys, because I only know Blackmon and Bryant. I think at Brandon Rogers, I recognize his name. So I'm going to go through the lineup, and you tell me if somebody jumps out from a fantasy perspective, good or bad. Let's try to be positive with the Rockies, because we're going to get to the holes in a second. Blackmon, they have him at DH to lead off. And then they have a guy named Ezekiel Tovar to be their shortstop. I guess they're expecting good things about him because he's the batting second. They have Nolan Jones. That should sound a little familiar.
Nolan Jones is a very good right fielder. The thing about Tovar is the Rockies he's kind of that wild card in their lineup right now because he's a younger guy that they are expecting to kind of take that step, especially with his power. So I think he's kind of one of those guys that maybe you buy low. I think this is a year where, like you said, they could move him up to even batting second because they see that much in him. So yeah, he's one of those guys that when I was reading through, when I was doing stuff about him, he kept popping up as a guy that people are like, he kind of is going to be, obviously baseball, one guy's not a make or break player usually, but he's a guy that could be the difference between the Rockies being a bad team and, hey, they actually got a good lineup.
Okay. So then they finish up with Chris Bryant at batting fourth. They moved him to first base. I guess that's because he's just struggling with injuries. They need to. Then they got Ryan McMahon, Brandon Rogers, Sean Bouchard, Elias Diaz at the catcher spot, and Bretton Doyle. Anybody there jump out?
I really like Elias Diaz. I think he's one of the top. I'd say he's probably a top 10 catcher for sure in baseball.
Really?
Yeah, he all-star. He's a very good, especially for the Rockies. I really like what he brings for them. That's what I keep saying is I would say 1 through 7 of this team is up there with the rest of the league's lineups. It's hard to look at their 1 through 7 and say it's that much weaker than anyone else in the rest of the league. Obviously, you're going to have teams with extremely high-end lineups that this can't compete with. But this is a team that if you looked at the lineup and didn't necessarily tell someone that this was the Rockies, so the pitchers are going to give up a bunch of runs, they'd look at this and be like, that's a 70, 75 win lineup.
So Diaz, you pointed out, he's older, so he's going to be in the veteran spot to potentially see if we can find some optimism here in the starting rotation. The way they have it set is Kyle Freeland to be the opening day starter, followed by Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomberg, excuse me if I'm getting it wrong, Ryan Feltner, Dakota Hudson, and Peter Lambert as the projected 6 starters. I'm going to be honest, I recognize the first 3 guys, but only because I've seen their names as starting pitchers. I don't know if I've seen them pitch. Cal Quantrill, I've seen pitch. Walk me through Kyle Freeland. Let's start with him. He's supposed to be the ace. Is he an ace? So if you said Blackman ranked, in the top 10, better half of baseball's leadoff hitters, where's Kyle Freeland ranked?
Actually, real quick before we go on to pitchers, I did want to point out Elias Diaz was the one who took Felix Bautista yard in the All-Star game. So that's where that's probably where people have, especially in Baltimore, that's where you've heard of him, is he was the guy everyone was booing as he took Bautista deep in the All-Star
Which
game.
Inspired Bautista to then be amazing in the second half. But.
So Kyle Freeland's definitely their best pitcher, and I don't think that is even remotely close.
Okay.
It's not that he's bad. It's just that it's the situation. When you look at his analytics and stuff, he's an above average pitcher. I say if he was on the Orioles, he's probably, especially with injuries, he's probably there 3 or 4. So he's only behind guys of like that top stuff, like the Corbin Burns, Grayson Rodriguez. He wouldn't go above them, but I would put him in that like Dean Kramer type realm. But unfortunately, like it's just pitching in Colorado. You can give up a weak fly ball that anywhere else is just gonna, that's an out, and it just carries out of there. So it's a product of his environment, unfortunately, right now, where even when he's pitching well, it's 1 or 2 pitches can go wrong and it's sitting over the fence in Colorado.
Don't want to put you too much on the spot, but if the Rockies ended up in the same boat that they were last year, is he a guy based on contract? Cal Quantrill, are those guys that the Rockies want to move? Like, if you're the GM of the Rockies, can you walk me through when do they expect to win? Do they expect to be good this year? Do you think it's next year? Where are they at?
They're in, unfortunately, a very tough spot because, like you said, they have a lot of veterans. You look up at Blackman, Bryant, Diaz, McMahon, all these guys are starting to head to the other.
That's why, not to cut you off, but that's why I thought this might be a team that could win 80, 85 games because they're. Can you get me there or not really?
I think they hit above 70. I think they overplay where they are. I think they can get to 70. I do think I was saying, 59 and a half, 60 and a half, 50. I saw all the way down to 58 and a half. I would do that. I just don't see how this lineup, if they're healthy, doesn't win games, especially on the road away from Colorado. Like their pitchers are good enough away from Colorado to win ball games. I think that's what kind of is the weird part about playing for the Rockies is you'll look at their ERAs home versus away. These guys are good enough, especially 1 through 4. They've all throughout their career 1 through 4. I haven't really. Lambert hasn't necessarily, but they've put together solid years at different points in their careers. Now, if they all come together and put together a solid year like their best years this year, this team can win 80 games. I mean, like we said, this has a good lineup. They have potential in the pitching rotation, but unfortunately, it's just always going to come back to playing in Colorado is just so hard for pitchers. Even if you have decent ones, it's not a guarantee that they're going to pan out playing there.
And if we went to their prospects and we said, is there anybody that jumps out at you that could potentially come up this year? Where is their farm system rank amongst the rest of baseball?
It's it's not horrendous. It's just their issue right now is they're in a spot where for too long they weren't sure what they were doing. They were selling like Brendan Rodgers was kind of like their big guy, their big prospect. And now that he's not, he's there and I don't want to say he's not doing well. He's doing well for, the Rockies, but he didn't take that step of stardom. At least,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he didn't take that, oh, he's a Bobby Witt, he's a Gunnar Henderson. He's the type of guy that can go and win you, an AL
And
rookie.
now they're hoping, and what you're saying is now that's what they're hoping for from the shortstop Tovar.
Yeah,
Where so if the Rockies get to 70 wins, but I think what I'm taking away from here, I'll do my own research to really dig deep and see just some more feelings about how the local guys are feeling about the Rockies. But what I'm hearing from you is if they're going to be bad, they're not winning 56, 57 games. You think it's going to be right around 65, and then
yeah.
on the upward swing, if everything clicks,
Mhm.
they could get to 70, 75. But you kind of, if you had to make a prediction, would you say at the trade deadline, some of these veterans we're
Yeah,
talking about, they end
they're
up
gonna.
getting moved?
Mhm. And that's where I think you're taking the risk is because
Ah, gotcha.
yeah, if they all of a sudden, they're hovering around where they're still sitting in that 60 to 70 win total, and all of a sudden they start fire sailing, that's where you
Hmm.
suddenly find yourself and you're like, crap, I love the top four of their lineup and now two of them are gone. So
That's a
that,
really good point.
yeah,
No, it's
that's
a really good.
the tough part about this.
That's a really good point. And you also, depending on what site you're using,
Mhm.
usually they'll update the win total they definitely updated at the All-Star break.
Yeah.
So that might be something where you can hedge your bet. If
Mhm.
you bet the over for the Rockies, and then you're like, oh crap, they're selling all their players. I got to
Yeah.
do some research on these prospects because not every prospect's created equal.
Yeah.
We know it being Orioles fans. I don't think there's a single player outside of, I mean, even James McCann is such a solid backup that Orioles, like if so and so is out for 2 weeks, that anybody would even care. It's almost like it doesn't matter. That's why
Yeah.
we're so deep. All right, I think we're gonna put the can on the pot on the Rockies there. Unless you had any final thoughts, but I'm ready to move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I think let's move on.
Let's do it. I'm gonna go a little out of order because I think the Padres are projected to be worse than the Giants. I'm gonna do the Padres first, then we'll go Giants. Padres, dude, I need some help here. So they're 82 and 80. Padres need some help. And being a Padres fan over the past few years, you think being a Ravens fan is exhausting. Being a Padres, it's like, what the hell are we doing? So now we finish 82 and 80 after getting our hearts broken in the playoffs. Then we get rid of Juan Soto.
Yeah.
Uh, where are
Blake's
we at? I'm
gone.
gonna go. Well, here, you start off with your thesis, if you will, on the Padres for this year.
Padres, I think the Padres still have to go add one of the four guys out there. Blake Snell's still out there. You have Matt
Right.
Chapman still out there, Jordan Montgomery, and Cody Bellinger. And I feel like they need one more piece, especially after getting rid of Juan Soto, because Manny Machado, we're not even sure if he's going to be ready for opening day. He had elbow surgery, so he's going to be DHing for the majority of the beginning of the year, which sucks not having his glove on that side on third base, obviously. But they're kind of, I would say they're obviously more upper echelon than the Rockies, but in the same sort of boat, you look at the lineup and you're like, this team should win 95 games. What are you talking
Mhm.
about? They only mustered up 82 wins last year. Like the star power here, you go Fernando Tatis, Machado, and Xander Bogaerts batting 2 through 4 is ridiculous.
You know what? So my takeaway from the Padres, one of the things I look for in sports, team sports,
Mhm.
is do you care more about winning than anything else? And in baseball, one of the things you can look for is are you willing to move the runner versus trying to get a hit? Because the more hits you get, the better the average, the more money you get, end of discussion, right? However, during a baseball game, it is important to hit the ball to the right side of the field to move the runner, right? And I looked at that Padres team as a bunch of selfish guys last year.
Mhm.
So I'm going to rip through this lineup. tell me what we're looking at, because there's one guy in particular I need you to educate me on. So first, let me get through the lineup. We got Hae-Sung Kim. Is that how I say
Yep.
it? All right. Hans, gotcha. Kim at shortstop. We got Bogarts at second. Tatis. They look like they have him in the outfield. We have Machado, like you said, DH. Cronenworth at first. Luis Campesino at the catcher spot. Jerkson Profur in the outfield. And then this is the guy I need some help with, or the last two guys, frankly. Matt Baton at third base and Jose Azocar in the outfield. Those are two names that are going to be replacing. Who else did they lose from the lineup last year? They had Soto, and then they lost someone else, didn't they?
Well, I guess it's also because, well, technically Nelson Cruz. I'm trying
Nelson Cruz, right? So
Yeah.
who are these last two guys? Are they? Because to me, like you said, the Padres lineup is solid at the top, but are these two guys valuable? Do they get on base? Can they run? Talk to me first about Matt Baton, the third baseman.
He's there until Machado can play third. As much as I would love to say no, he's got. If Manny Machado could play the field, Baton would not be sitting there. And Azocar actually is a very good defensive center fielder. I think he's going to be there mostly just to kind of be like a defensive guy. I don't expect too much from him with the bat, but like we said, especially once Manny comes back and they can kind of fill that 8 spot with a better bat. This is a good lineup.
Where are we at with it? Talk to me about. Let's move on to the pitching staff. Talk to me about Luis, the catcher. His bat puts him at 6. Looks like he had some, as a solid bat. Where is he as a defensive catcher, and then transition that into the starting rotation?
So Campusano, unfortunately, is in the tough spot of he is a good bat, and he's a former top prospect, but the Padres got the number 8 prospect, and he's a catcher, Ethan Salas. I'm not sure if he'll come up this year. I think there's a good chance he could eventually.
You're saying he's the 8th best prospect in the whole baseball? Is the AAA catcher for the Padres?
Yes. So, and then they have Jackson Merrill, who's supposed to come up sometime this year. He's the number 12 prospect in all baseball. He's a shortstop. So I think that's where you could start to see some movement, because I know they've been playing Xander Bogaerts at second. I believe that they want to put eventually Merrill at short, Bogaerts at second, and then you can start to switch guys around, sending Kim either to third to help replace Machado while he's still off, putting Cronenworth in the outfield. There's just a lot of different things that you can do once you bring up that one last piece to shortstop. And I think they're expecting Jackson Merrill to take kind of a step when he gets to the pros. I don't know how much help he'll be immediately, solely because it's hard for a rookie, obviously, to come up and immediately impact, especially in the NL West when they're going to be competing for the playoffs. I'm really intrigued by what Jackson Merrill is going to do with them, because I think he's kind of one of those wild cards where he reminds me a lot of the Orioles, kind of how we look at Orioles prospects, where you're sitting there and you're like, if he does come up and produce in the way we think he can, then he can add 5-6 wins to this team. He's just that big of a talent. But it's that adjustment period. Are you going to get we saw with Gunnar in the first month and a half last year, where he couldn't hit a volleyball with a beat. It's one of those things. So it's tough. I don't want to put too much pressure on him and say he's going to come up and it's going to change everything for the Padres and they're going to go on and win the World Series. But that should be a very important piece to them.
So you said something that was interesting as you were breaking everything down. One thing that jumped out at me. So Campusano, is that how I say his name?
Yeah, Campusano. That's how I say it. Campusano. Luis Campusano.
So he's 24 years old. He had 163 at bats last year and went 319 with 7 home runs. And then their best prospect, you're telling me, is their catcher. He's 24. To me, as a daily fantasy guy, as somebody that is thinking about betting on the Padres, I have to do all my research on this kid because if he's built like Adley Rutschman, then I'm like, oh, the Padres are going to be really good because this guy might end up being their best player. I mean, those numbers, that's over a nice stretch. And now you got the best prospect. That's all I'm hearing. He's breathing down my neck. Well, fuck that guy. I'm the best catcher. I'm going to call a great game. I'm going to be amazing. Or is he built in a different way and he tries too hard and maybe benefited last year by not having film on him? These are the kinds of things I hate when people bet on sports and they're like, well, I looked at the analytics. I was looking at I was like, have you ever watched this catcher bet? Because if you haven't watched a bet, I mean, how many times does a guy go 0 for 4 and you're like, that was a really good 0 for 4. Hit the ball hard, did a good thing. And then how many times where it's like he was 0 for 4 and it was a horrible 0 for 4. But if you didn't watch his at bats, you can't predict what's going on. So to me, just listening to you talk, I think everything revolves around that catcher spot for the Padres and that guy in particular. That would be my takeaway from the lineup and just basically your overall analysis. As we get into the starting rotation, obviously they're top heavy because everyone knows the first two guys. Musgrove is going to start on opening day. He's in the top. We'll do those rankings another day. I hate saying like top 10 and then it's like actually he's like 13th, but he's up there, right? Like Musgrove is fantastic. Yu Darvish is always solid. I'm going to need an education on the next three guys. Michael King. So why don't we do this? Michael King, Pedro Avila, Randy Vasquez. Those are the three projected guys. Blake Snell's still out there if they want to bring him back. There's some other guys. Talk to me about, let's start with Michael King. Where are we at with him?
So that's actually a guy that they got in return for Soto. Michael King was a fantastic reliever for the Yankees. And I'm extremely intrigued by the fact that the Padres, when they got him, were like, we view him as a starter. Because, so we talk about things like a little wild card. I think that's probably one of the biggest wild cards, if not the biggest on this team, because if Michael King can translate how he was as a reliever to a starter, now granted, that is a massive ask. It is not easy to say, hey, I know you pitched really well when you only had to throw 14 pitches a game. Can you give us that same production for 87? That's tougher. But if he can do well, and when I say well, if he can keep his ERA in threes, if he can be that competitive third starter, it's massive for the Padres, especially because they, like we said, I think they have to go out and get another starter. Whether it's Blake Snell, whether it's Jordan Montgomery, they need one more piece because it's extremely top heavy. I think.
Where's this Pedro guy? So they have Pedro Avila. Last year, he only threw 50 innings.
Yeah, it's going to be a big competition. From what I've seen up to 4 or 5 guys from the Padres are competing for that last spot. So it's really just going to be one of those things where it's whoever plays the best in spring training. I've seen Johnny Brito in there, Glenn Otto. They just have a lot of, I don't want to call them below average players, but it's just not necessarily guys that you would hope if you're going to compete for a World Series, you would like one of them to step up.
So their over-under is 81.5. If I told you had to pick them to win 71 or 91, what would you say is more likely?
91. I'll fall for it again. I'll be falls for it again because the star power on this team is too good for them to just be this mediocre each year. It really is.
So, and then it sounds like they're if they want and they play well, they can take those two prospects and flip them and go the other direction, add a starting pitcher. So Padres, let's see. So let me ask you one more Padres question, then we'll be done. If you think that there's a better chance they win 91 than 71, then if I told you had to bet $100 Okay, you can't keep your $100 and go drink or whatever the hell you do for fun. You either have to bet the Padres 13-1 or the Giants. That'll be our next team at 15-1. Where are you spending that $100 to win the NL West?
If I'm gonna pick one of them, it would be the Padres. The Padres, I believe, star power with, and not that star power means anything, but I think when you look at them, both teams on paper,
Have better potential.
Yeah, I think just overall the Padres have better players. I mean, it's one thing obviously because as we saw last year, team chemistry does play a massive role, and they felt like they were just off all year, and that's really where their struggles came through. But man, this is way too much talent for them to continue to throw it away like this.
So the Giants series, I'll start with this with the Giants. When the Orioles played the Giants, please correct me if I'm getting this wrong. I want to say my memory is good here. What was the lefty Lester that got the hit? Was that in the Giants series or was that against the Brewers? It was Giants, right?
Yeah.
So there's certain memories of the Orioles from last year that just stick out. That John Lester game, that was just fantastic. So that anyway, I say that to say that I also remember who's their best pitcher, Logan Webb, and we got him for a couple runs early. Yeah. And then he shut us down. And I remember watching that game. It was late at night. And I was like, man, this Logan Webb is so nasty. Just love the way he pitches. We're going to do it a little different with the Giants because I wanted to start with him. We'll do the pitchers and then we'll do the lineup.
Yeah.
Logan Webb, I can't say enough good things about him just by watching him. He's one of my favorite pitchers. I would not bet against him. Nope. A lot of times he'll be too heavy of a favorite. So I don't like doing minus 230, minus 270, but because he's only 26, I think you can sneak in some good value with him if he goes up against other aces where maybe the name recognition isn't quite there yet. So I love Logan Webb. I need help here. They got Jordan Hicks. I recognize Jordan Hicks.
Another guy that
reliever, right?
Yeah, for some reason, it was the big thing this offseason was getting relievers and making them starters. Yeah, they're going to rely on Jordan Hicks to be their number 2 to start. I will say caveat with the Giants is Alex Cobb and Robbie Ray are both going to start the year on the IL. So that is 2 guys that are massive to get back when you add them to the rotation. Then you can go Logan Webb, Jordan Hicks, Robbie Ray, Alex Cobb. And that looks a lot better than when right now the lineup I'm looking at has Kyle Harrison, Keaton Wynn, and Tristan Beck as the 3 through 5. And those are 3 very unproven pitchers. And you're kind of throwing a crapshoot out there hoping that they pitch well until those 2 come back.
When do we expect Cobb and Ray to come back? Do you know?
So Robbie Ray is still recovering from Tommy John. I'm not expecting him back until closer to the All-Star break. Alex Cobb, I think we'll see maybe May, like early May. I think his is not as bad. It's just I think with Robbie Ray, that's kind of their X factor. That's someone, if they're hanging around when Robbie Ray gets back, I'm not a big fan of Robbie Ray just because of his time in Toronto, but that's besides the point. He is a very good pitcher. I mean, former Cy Young winner. He's a very good pitcher that they trade for, and I think he can do some damage for him.
So this guy that we're going to talk about, Kyle Harrison, this is how you beat Vegas, is Kyle Harrison. For better or for worse, this is how you beat Vegas. So Kyle Harrison is going to start for the Giants. He's 21 years old. He started last year, only 7 games through 34 innings. So you have some film to watch, but Vegas doesn't know how good he's going to be. No one knows unless you want to beat them to the punch. So he's either going to be good, bad, somewhere in the middle. And for the first, usually it takes, 3 to 5 starts for some of these new guys. I remember feeling that way about Kyle Bradish. I'm like, I know he's good. I can just feel it. And the line, from a gambling perspective, it takes a minute. Vegas sets the line. They don't watch all these games and analyze what they think is going to happen. They're trying to get the money on both sides. So somebody like Kyle Harrison, if you have a strong opinion, now would be a good time to let it loose on us. Is he going to be an ace? Because the Giants are sure hoping so.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the Giants are hoping so. I think he's probably there. We talked about X factors and wild cards. He's going to be that for this rotation. I think Robbie Ray's your X factor. He's coming back, and boom, you can have that another ace type pitcher join the rotation. But Kyle Harrison is going to be. He's setting the floor for the rotation, because if he's really bad, it can take the whole rotation down. But if he just pitches solid, and I'm talking, give him a 3.8 to 4 ERA, nothing crazy, help them win ball games. This team is
because he's the 11th. So, you have all these different lists of prospects and rankings. So it doesn't matter if he's ranked 11th, 13th, or 8th. Depends on who you're going to read. But what you want to understand from an analysis standpoint is, what do the Giants think of him? How are they going to use him? And what it sounds like to me is he's going to be the type of guy that gets to work through it, right? You have some guys like Cole Irvin, for example, bring everything back to the Orioles. Love Cole Irvin, but he doesn't get a chance this year to work through it. If you don't do good, you're out in the first inning. Like, seriously, it's just not going to work out. You'll go back to the bullpen. End of story. Not every guy gets treated the same way. Grayson Rodriguez will be given 15 starts before they're like, shit, we really got to send him back now. We don't want to, but hell, we're going to let him keep pitching because we already did that song and dance last year. Kyle Harrison struggled in AAA. They let him come up anyway. He didn't necessarily light the world on fire. So that first 2 or 3 starts, if you feel great about them, you're going to get good value. So that'll be somebody to look at. Tristan Beck pitched last year for the Giants. Thought he was solid. Like, any thoughts on him, and then some of the other guys that they're going to potentially use until Cobb gets back?
No, I honestly, they're after Kyle Harrison, when it goes to Tristan Beck and them, and Keaton, those guys are very much hope for the best.
They're not the highest rated prospect.
Yeah, they're not going to be the highest rated. They're not the highest rated prospects. They don't have that, glare of, and stardom of, the number 23 prospect in Kyle Harrison. This guy is, kind of how we viewed Grayson Rodriguez as he was coming up. It's like, this guy's our future ace. Like you said, these guys probably aren't getting the, you gave up 6 runs in 4 straight games. Keep going out there, buddy. They do that. It's okay. Who do we have left that we can put out there? So definitely shorter leashes than a guy like Kyle Harrison will have, just because of, what the prospect level is with Harrison. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't say they're going to relying to win games. They're hoping that they don't.
And it's interesting because the Giants are one of those teams this year where you have to do the research, because their projected closer, want to get into him for a second, Camilo Doval, only threw 67 innings last year. He's only 25 years old. The Giants are one of those teams where if you're just trying to guess or looking at analytics, I think you're really behind the 8 ball. They're going to have a lot of new faces in the pitching rotation, and in the bullpen, they got 2 Rogers. That should make it. They got to be brothers, right? Tyler and Taylor. Okay.
Yep, and they look and pitch the exact same. It's weird. It's weird.
So the Giants, they're just one of those teams where, because it was only 2 years ago that they won. Yeah, they won the division. They beat the Dodgers, and then they had that classic, divisional round series that they fell short in. And then last year it just didn't work out. Let's go through their lineup. I love Logan Webb. I'll give the Cy Young odds on that in a second. But first, I want to shut up and let you roll through this lineup. So I'm going to read you off all the guys, and then just go. We got Jung Ho Lee. That was their big signing. He's going to be the leadoff guy, it looks like. And then they got Estrada at second base. Really love him. Great glove. Lamonte Wade at first base. Really like him a lot, too. Jorge Soler.
St. Paul's guy from Baltimore.
There you go. Jorge Soler looks like, he was the World Series MVP a few years ago. Conforto, really tough out. Wilmer Flores, we'll get to him in a second. Mike Yastrzemski, Patrick Bailey at the catcher spot, and then a new face, Marco Luciano at shortstop. I'm assuming he's a good defender because they have him projected ninth. Go ahead, rip through this lineup. What are your thoughts?
Well, Luciano, start there. He is the 39th rated prospect. Also, he's a guy that they have kind of had circled on for a few years. He's still young at 22. I think he's a guy that, yeah, they're going to bat him ninth just to kind of get his feet wet at first. Maybe he ends up, batting there long term just because he is such a good fielder. But he's a guy that they are expecting big things from.
Okay.
From Patrick Bailey. Patrick Bailey was another top prospect catcher that last year that came up and did really well and started to really change, give the Giants. I almost said play like Buster Posey, but give the Giants something that they haven't really had at the catcher position since Buster Posey. And I think they're extremely excited about him. Like we said, Jung Ho Lee coming over from the Cape on the massive 5-year, $100+ million. It's going to be interesting because he has potential long term to be a factor for this team. Someone who can just be headache for opposing, always getting on base. But it's what's that going to be like? Even with all the time. So that's what I'm interested is how quickly can and produce.
So I'm having a hard time figuring out why they're only projected to win 81 and a half games. I think that just by listening to your analysis and realizing that they have, to me, the perfect mix of top prospects mixed with guys in their prime. And I feel like I'm a Logan Webb. Like, what is wrong with me? I keep talking about
They've got great vets. I love the Jorge Soler signing just had. I also obviously soft spot because he was one of my favorite Orioles prospects we never saw. But Mike Yastrzemski, man, he's one of those guys. He just is always getting on base. It doesn't matter. Even if he's bad, he's going to find a way to go bat and get on.
So how do they not win 90 games? Like, what's the pathway? Is it just that the rotation is just not up to par? The guys don't pan out?
I think it's a lot of the division, going up against the Padres, going up against the D-backs, going up against the Dodgers. It's going to be tough. It's like, AL East. As much as you look at and you're like, all these teams, 95 win teams, they're going to beat up on each other. So I think that's where I think in these projections, is assuming Dodgers probably of their 12 matchups with the team, I would say around feels like the win total between the Dodgers of division. It feels like Vegas is really Dodgers to kind of whoop up on the rest of the division.
So I think I don't know if it's my phone or your phone. It feels like a slight delay. Hang on one second, since we're live. I'm going to do everything I can to not accidentally end the freaking live stream. That'll be solid of me. Does it feel like I'm skipping? It just feels like you're skipping a drop on me.
Oh, really?
That sounds a little better.
Hear the feedback.
Do you hear that a little bit?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody's hearing exactly what you're saying.
Are we? Oh, yeah.
It's all right if you need to take a second. I'm going to pull up the Diamondbacks. Did a pretty good job wrapping up on the Giants anyway. So just see if it's something that is a quick fix, as we're not the technology experts over here. That's for freaking sure.
Hey, what is going?
Sorry, if you need to sign out or potentially come back in. I remember when we first started, what was it, like 40 minutes ago? And I was like, I think my phone's broken. And you're like, well, maybe if you just turn the camera the other way. It's like,
yeah,
oh.
let's see if I can come back real quick. That does anything.
Yeah, try that real quick. I'll get the Diamondbacks up for us. And then if we lose you, then I guess I'm breaking down the Diamondbacks by myself, which will not be super helpful for everybody, as we rely on Zach for that. And then, hang on one second. You can hear my dog sleeping. Oh, that's nice. Let's see if this works. Brief intermission. You back?
Yeah. Hey, is it still happening or?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what we needed. Because I felt
Awesome.
like we were this close to me breaking down the Diamondbacks, which consists of just the World Series last year. So thankfully you're back.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, let's
right.
let's dive in.
Let's dive into the Diamondbacks. So just to put a cap on the Giants and the Padres are in the same spot. I personally and I'll do all my predictions once I actually, really do my own research. This is kind of like the preliminary, get Zach's overview of things. Then I'll really dig into it. But I like what I see from the Giants. I see a lot of potential. So high on the Giants, high on Logan Webb, high on their lineup. It'll be interesting to see their prospects and how they do this spring. That's another thing, right? Like as much as we're talking about this now, really doesn't make sense to bet on any of these games or any of these future bets for another 2-3 weeks because there's going to be some injuries. But all right, let's go Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks last year obviously were the surprise. So that was the team along with the Orioles where if you were on the Diamondbacks, well, they didn't have as many wins, obviously, as the Orioles did, but playoffs, they made people a lot of money. Talk to me about the Diamondbacks. Where are we at with them? And then we'll go through their lineup.
Diamondbacks are weird because it's one of those teams where, yeah, they did very much overachieve in the playoffs. And I think, it's going to be hard to get back to the World Series. So it kind of stinks a little for them that they're going to have all these expectations because it was such a magical season and magical run last year that not making it to the World Series seems like a failure. But
Right.
that shouldn't, because of this team is still young and is still kind of on the uprise, but they took such a big step last year and kind of made that magical run to the World Series where people are like, hey, you got to go win it now. It's like, that's probably not where this team is necessarily at still. Like they'll compete, they'll go into the playoffs and compete for a spot, but it's definitely not a World Series or bust type team, even though they were there last year.
They're a very, very solid team, a solid organization.
Mm-hmm.
Corbin Carroll is he? You can't even say enough good things about him. He's just fantastic. Marte was amazing in the playoffs. Christian Walker at the 3 spot. Peterson, if he can get a hold of what he's hit or miss a lot of times, literally hit or miss. Gabriel Moreno, the catcher. I mean, seriously, he was so good last year. I absolutely love Suarez, the third baseman, Alec Thomas, Luis Gurriel Jr., and the shortstop is fantastic. Perdomo. They are a solid team. They're the type of team that you don't feel like playing. They're going to make you work for absolutely everything. Galen, they're obviously started in the All-Star game last year. He's fantastic. Merrill Kelly, awesome. And then they got Brandon Platt, who was really solid. And then what they do, they said, you know what, we got to add somebody. Can't just bring back the same team. And they got Eduardo Rodriguez.
Yeah.
There's not, like you said, they're weird because there's not any holes. I think they win more than 84 games, obviously, but that's not their overall. Their overall, and then I'll put you on the spot, I just had it a second ago, I think it's 91. It's only 83. Really? Talk to me. What am I missing? It's only 83.5 here on FanDuel. I guess I looked at something else this morning. I can't like every team in the NL West. Maybe I'm not going to like the Dodgers, but I really like the Giants. And I watched too much of the Diamondbacks last year to not think they're going to win 84 games. Why is it? What are we missing here?
I think it comes back to the whole division's really good, and they're going to have to play 50 games, 60 games inside the division. So that, is really where it's going to be tough, because, you're going to play the Dodgers 13 times. You're going to play the Giants 13 times. You're going to play the Padres 13 times. And so in those games, I think they do hold their own. But I definitely I love their top 3-4 pitchers. I love their lineup. It is, like you said, it is weird. The whole NL West is so stacked. You look at every team and you're like, I love this team. It's so well built.
It almost feels like it almost feels like as we go into the Dodgers in a few minutes that you have to start with how many wins you think the Dodgers, like if you think they're going to be historically great at 120, 125. Like if you really think that's in play, then you're probably better off leaving these other teams alone.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't feel that way, and I think that's probably where I'm headed, because I just I don't know. We'll get to wrap up on the Diamondbacks. Tell me the biggest downfall in the lineup. Like, where do you see maybe somebody in the postseason? Because your last memory of the Diamondbacks were, man, all these guys. Like, I just went through them. I'm like, hey, I like this guy, I like that guy. Who should I kind of stay away from this year? Be a wet blanket for somebody, because it's not Carroll. That's the superstar. I don't see a regression in him. But is there a player or two in that lineup where you're like, I just think, and also before you answer that, one of the things you have to take into account with the Diamondbacks is they played a lot of extra games, and like they're young. A lot of those pitchers, we see it with Kyle Bradish right this second. He's not going to pitch at least probably for the first week or two, miss a start. So it's one of those things where the Diamondbacks might run out of energy and then reload for the following year. But go through that lineup for me and tell me some guys to potentially stay away from.
Well, I think something we got to bring up is Jordan Lawler is the number 11 prospect in baseball, and he's most likely going to start at shortstop for them sometime. He got some time towards the end of last year.
But he didn't make their postseason roster, correct?
I don't believe so, or he made it and didn't play. One of the two.
Right. I don't remember hearing about him. So you're saying he's the top shortstop, one of the top shortstops in the game, but the Diamondbacks' best prospect. So they got another guy to bring up. So where's is it just that is it Christian Walker's just not that good? Peterson's not that good? Like, tell me how the Diamondbacks only win maybe 73, 74 games this year.
I think kind of what you talked about is there a little bit of World Series hangover? They did go, there was that huge emotional, oh my God, we're in the World Series, everything we want is right in front of us. You don't get it. And now it's okay. Are expectations too high? Are they all of a sudden worn out because their expectations? Last year, there was no expectations. It was, hey, let's go out there and see what we can do. Now, a young team has expectation. It's, hey, you have to go win 90 games and go to the World Series. Just did that. Why aren't you going? We did the whole win 80 games and go to the World Series last year. You got to go do it again. So I'm wondering what the pressure aspect's going to do to this year.
Yeah, they're the team that the first month of the season, there's some teams where it doesn't truly matter. You kind of feel like maybe they'll work through some different things. They seem like a team where they really got to start off April in a good mood. They don't want to be 8-13, and then this guy gets injured, and then some of the things we're talking about. All right, we saved it for last. Let's do the Dodgers. It's only 103.5. 104 in some places as their win total. But seriously, like I thought, like the way some people talk, let's just do it. They got Ohtani, they got Mookie, they got Freddie Freeman in the order that's projected. They got Mookie, Freddie Freeman, Ohtani, Will Smith, Max Muncy, James Outman, and then they got. You forgot that they got Hernandez from the Mariners. Yeah. Right? Like out of nowhere, they got him. And then they got Jason Hayward batting 8th. Man, Jason Hayward makes me feel old. How old is Jason Hayward?
Jason Hayward found the youth in LA, and I don't know what happened because he disappeared off the face of Major League Baseball for like 3 years and did nothing and was just like an average player, below average bench bat. Goes to the Dodgers and becomes Jason Hayward that we all knew from like 2014, and it's ridiculous. And like you said, Gavin Lux, former top prospect, coming back for them, so the rich get richer.
Pick one guy. You only can have one out of all of them based on their value. Not that who's going to have the best season, but from a daily fantasy perspective or just a fantasy baseball perspective, who do you think would be the best value of that lineup?
I'm a big Max. I just think when he's hot, the way that he had his power, he just hits them in droves. He's one of the guys you can feel he's starting to get hot. You can ride him for a little bit, and he's
So Corbin Burns, Kyle Bradish, Adley Rutschman, whoever the starting pitcher is, Grayson Rodriguez and Adley, they get together before they have to face the Dodgers in the World Series this year. And they're like, all right, got to go through this lineup. Just like it's natural to be like, we have to get this guy out. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to compare it to the Ravens, for example, my logic would always be as a defender, Mark Andrews, that's where we'll want to start with him, right? Yeah. So where in God's name do we start with this? Like, how do you approach the lineup? What would honestly be your strategy? Do you go in there and say, hey, I have to get Mookie Betts out? Or it's like, well, seriously, what is the thought process?
You get Mookie Betts out. And after you get Mookie Betts out, you hope to get Freddie Freeman out.
And how do you get Mookie Betts out, though? Like, am I trying to strike him out? Do I want him to swing at the first pitch? What am I doing against them?
Unfortunately, their top three, you make your pitches and hope that they don't hit them. And it is unreal. That's why it's so crazy with this team, because there is that expectation of you look at it and you're like, who do I pitch to? What do I do? But there are flaws in their game. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman did what? They combined for one hit in the playoffs. They were like 145. So it's not like this team, it's not like they're unstoppable. There are flaws. There are this. I think this Dodgers team screams classic. They'll win 105 and then they'll lose in the NLCS. Like, it just feels like that type of Dodgers team, even adding Ohtani. And we haven't even gotten to the rotation he added.
Yeah, to me, Mookie Betts is, because he leads off, he's in the prime of his career. If he has another year, what did he do last year? He was 307, 39 home runs, and 107 RBIs.
Yeah, he only finished second in that MVP. It wasn't that bad.
If he does that again, they go over. If he's down to 275 and has to miss 35 games, maybe the rest of the guys don't hit as well. Without him on base, we'll see. All right, let's go through it. Please first pronounce Yamamoto's first name, if you don't mind.
Yoshinobu.
Perfect. So we don't know anything about him except he got $300 million, and that's not even half of what Ohtani got. Who the hell is Landon Knack? They said he's supposed to be the next guy for them. Like, is this guy supposed to be amazing, or where are we at with him?
For which guy?
So we have, what do we got? Landon Knack? Is that how I pronounce it?
What I'm saying is Yamamoto, Glasnow, Bobby Miller, Paxton, and Emmett. That's kind of where I think they go with the rotation.
I apologize. Landon Knack, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong thing. He's one of their AAA guys that potentially could make the roster. You're right. It's Yamamoto, Glasnow, Bobby Miller, Paxton, and then they still got Sheehan in there, right?
Yep. And then Walker Buehler will come back eventually.
He didn't pitch at all. He only pitched a few games last year, or not even?
I think
I think he pitched a couple games.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when he got Tommy John. I think so. He'll return mid-season for Tommy John, and then that's kind of, what kind of Walker do we see? Do we get Walker Buehler or less version?
And then what's the deal with Kershaw for this year?
I don't know. Like, I don't know why it is just. It makes no. It's like I legitimately feel just there for the ride. Like, I'm not sure what happens.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers rotation, based on everything I'm reading, because the reason that guy Landon Knack jumped out at me is because he was their top prospect last year. They have some things to, I guess the way I would look at what the Dodgers rotation is, because they have so many guys, and because you said Buehler will be back from injury, feels like a glorified, I don't want to say a tryout for the first 3 months of the season, but the lineup should carry us. They're loaded. The bullpen's loaded. They'll figure out if they need to make a trade because they have. I mean, they're just an embarrassment of riches. The Dodgers really I keep make all the comparisons back to Baltimore sports, but the Dodgers and the Ravens kind of feel like it feels like the same boat, right? Like, unfortunately, you'll try to enjoy the regular season, like for some highlights, and you'll You should. You got to transform your mind if you're a Dodgers fan to be excited when they win 9 games in a row and not be like, well, it doesn't matter until we get to October. The same way with the Ravens, because they're going to be great next year, and you don't want to be a wet blanket in the middle of October and be like, well, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if we're just talking about winning the championship, yeah, the Dodgers, it really doesn't make too much sense to analyze them because we kind of know that by the All-Star break, that they'll be one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the league, and they'll most likely make a trade or 2 for whatever they need, and that'll just be that. I think the thing that, from a gambling perspective, what you want to do with the Dodgers, and this is, I know you're not the gambling expert here, but what I would scream from the mountaintops, and if I'm wrong, or if you disagree, please tell me. But the 2 things you don't do in baseball is you don't take the big favorite, and by big favorite, my rule is minus 150. If you want to make it 140, I think 150 is the highest. If you see a team higher than minus 150, I automatically stay away from it because the Rockies are projected to win 60 games. So that's still a lot of games to win. And then secondly, don't be a jackass and take the team minus 1.5. I can't tell you how many times that is because you know why? Because you can't recover after that loss. If you lose a game, if you bet a team minus 1.5 and they win 3-2, or they win 4-3, or they win 7-6, I guarantee you will go on tilt. It's like getting a bad beat in poker where by your friend, by the guy at the table that you actually don't like, and you don't like. It's I wouldn't mind losing to someone else, but because he beat me, now I'm in a bad mood. So don't do minus 1.5 on the Dodgers. Just don't do it. My best advice would be there's certain times, there's certain websites where you can bet the whole series. And I think that if you think they're going to sweep the series, and you can get maybe hell, you might even be able to get plus 110 on that. You're I think the Dodgers are just going to sweep the Cardinals this weekend. Then maybe just bet that, or bet the over for their team total. That's another mistake people make, which is, hey, the over-under is 9.5. Dodgers won 7-0. I can't believe the other. Well, dude, that's just not. It was over 6 for the Dodgers run total. If that was your logic to bet the over, then hell, just bet the over for the Dodgers total. You don't have to bet
that they're covered themselves. I see so many guys, especially friends, will be like, "This guy's on the mat over in the game, facing an ace." The other team got 4 runs too.
Exactly. All right. Well, good. That was good. We'll do the NL Central next week. I kept you longer than you're contractually obligated, so I appreciate that.
NL Central, because that's just I don't know what there. That's
we'll get play a lot of.
Yeah, we saw a lot of teams this week the NL West. We're gonna see a lot of me competing for the NL Central.
And it probably will start with the Brewers because that way we can sneak in some Orioles talk. We're going to stay away from Orioles projections at the moment and try to enjoy spring training. I know it's hard to enjoy it when you have to guess who's going to be on the team, but it's a lot more fun than just watch the highlights and listen to them talk. And
exactly.
All right, I'm gonna let you roll. But yeah, before you go, is there somebody that we can we can follow that maybe we don't already know?
Yeah. So Jacob Rhyme Time 05 on Twitter. My college basketball. He's who I go. All things college basketball. It's RHME05, and he probably doesn't have the most followers, but knowledge-wise, I get a lot from him.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sweet. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend. This was cool. And I will see you next week. Hope everybody, if you're betting this weekend on the NBA, I just strongly advise you not to. I can't watch the NBA. I just want to get this off my chest. I was watching these games yesterday, and it's dude, all I wanted to do was talk baseball with you the next morning because the arguing every effing play and not getting back on defense. All right, let me stop before I sound like I'm 50.
No, I agree. NBA, it's horrible. That's why I watch college basketball.
Yeah. All right, man. Have a great weekend. I shall see you next week.
Yep. All right. See you guys.